dreams are small, and you feel 10 feet tall. That's it, that's all, you're in love.
I'm Thora Cooper, maybe Evan. My ex and I were together since high school. We started dating when we were in grade 10. Well, just over 18 years. Our daughter is turning 18 on Saturday, actually. Long time. In high school, we actually went to separate high schools. So we had a mutual girlfriend that we just kind of both hung out with one day, and the rest was history. We have 2 kids. Our oldest was a surprise. Our youngest, there's 5.5 years between them. Our youngest is 12. No. The oldest child that we had was a surprise. We were teen parents. We actually never really had a discussion about having children at all. I definitely knew I wanted to have 2 kids, and I'm not sure where he sat on that, but we did decide to have a second one, and then I was ready for my family to be complete with that. Being a teen mom, I have to admit that my ex and I were really fortunate in that we had extremely supportive family. My mom actually wound up leaving her job and babysitting full-time so that she could assist us in childcare. We were really fortunate that we were able to go back to school pretty much immediately or not have to worry too much about expenses and that kind of thing. Without their support, we would have struggled a lot more. I had in my mind that I wasn't going to be any type of teen mom statistic. I won the good fight. But I went off to college and gained a successful career, and it's been actually a blessing, really. We did hide it from his grandma on the one side for a long period of time, which I thought was really bizarre, putting like heavy sweaters over top of me so that she wouldn't know. I'm like, are we gonna hide the baby? Yeah. I was raised Anglican. My mom was a regular churchgoer. I was a Sunday school child. My ex's family was actually Catholic. When we had our first, not a lot physically changed that way. Like, we were not living together. We were still living with our respective parents, being teenagers. Bought our first house and moved in together. And then things changed a fair amount. Both being taken from our parents, basically not having lived on our own. Moving in together, there was a lot of adapting. There were some struggles for sure then, a little bit of battling because we didn't have any discussion. We didn't have discussion about kids or being married or anything like that because our relationship kind of just fell together. And essentially I think that's kind of what kept us together. That was kind of the plan, like we're going to stay together and raise a family together. So not having any discussions about who's responsible for what and like what our finances would look like and so on and so forth, that definitely posed some challenges. We did take that opportunity to discuss it with a counselor and figure out how we could respectfully move forward and trust each other.
Did you feel like it was always a kind of a struggle to make it fit? Like the puzzle pieces didn't go together?
Definitely at times. Well, we were both raised in different households. Certainly my upbringing was very different from his upbringing. My parents were a little bit older than his parents. I mean, I was brought up a little less fortunate than his family was, but we kind of worked past that. Our second child came along. We struggled a little bit financially. He had lost his job. We actually wound up having to move in with his parents for a period of time. That was interesting. Huge argument. Finances were an issue probably all along, I would say, up until maybe the last 5 years of our relationship, where we were both in a position where we were making kind of the same. Nobody was really the breadwinner over the other. We were able to just kind of separate things. It was like, we're splitting all of our bills down the middle. And actually that was the most successful way for us to kind of live together comfortably. What was left over was our spending money. There was no questions as to like, why do you get to buy clothes and I have to do this or whatever. There was less resentment that way, I feel. Yeah. There was a period of time where I was the breadwinner, which I think was kind of a harder pill to swallow because a man often is the one. There's lots of things that kind of led up to our breakup. Unfortunately, fortunately, I guess I should say, having a child together so young ultimately kind of was the glue that kept us together for so long, fighting towards making a family and having a unit, I think was something that we both really wanted. However, with them being older, kind of the dynamics changed a little bit, and it wasn't such a we have to stay together for the kids, or not that that's a reason to stay together at all. They were starting to live their own separate lives. And my oldest, I mean, she's going to be going off to college in the fall, and they're almost never home anymore. They have their own social lives. My ex and I had a lot of ups and downs in our relationship. We had visited marriage counselors on several occasions, and it would help for a period of time. But I mean, conventional therapy, it's very much just giving you ideas, and you have to make it work. You have to use the tools that you're given, or expand your knowledge on it, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm the type of person to pick up Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus or whatever to find solutions. And we did a lot of that. Finally got to a point where we actually went away to a marriage retreat, which broke our bank. It was very expensive. It wasn't conventional therapy. It was the woman actually was more of like a trainer. She took ideas that you would lay out to employees. Here's your handbook, this is what you do, da 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 da. What she had laid out made more sense in 2 days than months of therapy. Honed in on what was so important to women and what was so important to men, and how the dynamics of your relationship are, and how you can repair those, and gave you the full opportunity to speak your mind and not feel quite put on the spot, but also appreciate your spouse, which was so important and not necessarily brought up with other therapies. And I feel like we walked away with that with some really great ideas. However, we didn't really apply them the way that they maybe should have been applied. And I don't feel like either of us are really one to blame or the other to blame. We just eventually got to the point where we grew apart. Going to therapy wasn't working anymore. We were constantly going back or having a problem every couple of years. That's really not the way to live. Your relationship should really be more happy. I think originally our arguments were more the fuck yous and slamming doors and crying and carrying on. But as we got older, I feel like we kind of grew away from that and did sit down and discuss things a little bit more adult-like. But I don't know that we necessarily came to solutions all the time. Sometimes there was a lot of stonewalling, like shutting down, walking away from the situation, brushing it under the rug, and not really dealing with it, or just kind of accepting that this is my problem and I'm just going to deal with it. And eventually that became too much. It started to wear on us, and we started to recognize how we weren't compatible and how ultimately life's too short, you should be happy. And us being together when we were so young, I mean, we were still kids, we were still growing and maturing, and we never really had the experience to figure out who we were as adults or who we were as people. And I grew into just a mom and a wife, and I lost a huge part of myself, and I feel as though he probably did as well. We did everything together. It was very codependent. That started not sitting very well with me, for sure. I'm actually the one that ended our relationship. But now that we're separated, there was a couple of months that weren't so happy. They were not happy with us, and they certainly had some outlash and whatnot with us. It hasn't quite been a year. It'll be a year next month. I'd say in the last 3 months or so, they've kind of adapted to it. The kids are kind of just comfortable with it now. So much better as ex is. I kind of pride myself in the fact that we can co-parent really well together. We'll touch base with one another and just say, like, our daughter is going to this party, are you okay with it? Or our daughter has to go to work, can you pick her up? Or, you know, that kind of thing. And we actually make better friends than we ever did spouses. And honestly, we get along great. It took a lot of work to get to that point, and I'm really stubborn and refuse again to be a statistic. I once loved him, and I know that our relationship was good once. Why would I want to ruin a friendship? Why would I want to hate him? Why would I want to feel those feelings? I personally was pushing towards us not being assholes to one another, quite frankly. We bought a business together. This was shortly after our marriage retreat and trying to make things work. It was a make or break situation. It got to the point where we were spending 24 hours a day together. We didn't have those outside interests, even though having outside interests and like being apart from one another and making sure that we were socializing with friends, it just didn't end up coming to that. And we were spending 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. and then going to bed. Personally, for me, I don't know how he felt, but for me, I was bored, wanted something to change, and I was frustrated and feeling like we were bringing work home all the time, and that was all we were really talking about. There was no outside interests and time apart. And it lost its mystery. We became roommates more than anything. In our relationship, there was some imbalance there somehow. My expectations were maybe too high. Like, I have to take some blame for that for sure. You have to put 100% effort in, and you have to figure out what the other person's looking for and bend over backwards. Never stop impressing your partners. No. I wouldn't do anything differently. As difficult as it might be to say, I'm happier with the person who I am now. I am not the type of person to have any type of regret over anything. I don't think that we could have changed anything. Even if we did try and change something, that we would have still wound up in the same spot because there was a disconnect. There was something like we were just growing apart. You know, I could say, oh, I wish we didn't buy the business together. Maybe our marriage would have lasted or something like that. But ultimately, everything happens for that reason. I feel as though we learned a lot from one another. I feel like it was our time to separate. I think we're both happier, honestly. I don't think so. I mean, I think our relationship was different in that we were together so young, grew to love one another. Because I mean, like when you're 16, do you really know what love is, and do you really know what you're looking for? Like high school, where you're just going out with whomever. Dating is weird right now. You're looking for different things in particular, and when you're 16, you're not looking for those same things. You don't know what you want. Really, ultimately, what you're looking for when you're 16 is not what you're looking for when you're in your mid to late 20s or 30s. So we were well, no, I don't want to say there was a time where we were very sexually compatible, and then that kind of changed a lot. Me being the age I'm in my prime, and like we're the same age, so there was definitely some differences there. I feel like we tried to be fairly open about it. However, I feel like what we were both interested in, be it the frequency, be it the foreplay, be it fantasies and so on and so forth, they were kind of different. It was kind of a touchy subject at times, for sure. Personally, I'm pretty open-minded and free-spirited, so like, and so was he, so we were able to mostly communicate about things, and there wasn't like any taboo subjects or anything like that. Certainly some differences in opinions or ideas, or knowing maybe what the other person wanted, or expressing how that should come about was certainly difficult, and I feel like I learned a lot from that. Now I know how to communicate that type of topic a little bit better than, and I have him to thank for that. If there was any issues as far as the bedroom goes, it was brought up. And I think that we both felt like sex was a pretty important dynamic of the relationship, really. Yeah. I am out doing things that I wouldn't have done necessarily, which is kind of nice, actually. I have to admit, our split up, although sometimes makes me a little bit kind of disappointed that he wouldn't maybe step up to what he is now. And I'm so grateful that we are split up, because I feel he's a better dad, and I don't want to say better, I guess. Yeah. He's a more active dad. He's more involved with his kids, and you know, he's gone and done like a photo shoot with them. He wouldn't have done that if that would have been on me. Okay. You know, and he's made a point of taking them out for dinner, like doing silly things with them. And not that he didn't necessarily do those things, but he did them less. And now, because we're split up, he has that 50% of the time that he is a really active parent. But I took on the role of being mom, and like the kids would come to me and so on and so forth. They wouldn't necessarily go to him, and now they have to. I feel as though, yeah, we both kind of stepped away a little bit and kind of focused on ourselves and regrouped. And I mean, it's a painful part. Like, you're losing a huge part of yourself. I think we both took the other person for granted. In 10 years from now, I would hope to be in another relationship, but a different type of relationship, because my marriage was something that kind of just came next. I haven't experienced falling in love and getting married and that kind of thing, so I hope to be in a relationship and get married again. I hope to find a relationship where I can find a partner that we complement each other a little bit more. I like having somebody that can be my big spoon, and it's nice to have somebody around. As much as you can rely on your friends and family, they're gonna go eventually too. So, and ultimately they have their own social lives. And certainly in my age group, I hate saying this, but it's just as kind of difficult, because there's a lot of still single 20-something-year-olds, which are not my type. And there's older people who are, you know, midlife crisis, kind of divorcing or that kind of thing. Practice makes perfect, so be careful what you practice. To never stop impressing your partner. Constantly going out of your way, like you were when you were dating. Why would you change that? If you were to buy flowers for your girlfriend, why would you stop doing that 10 years down the road? You know, if you were to surprise your husband with dinner, his favorite dinner that you specifically went out and made, wearing nothing but an apron, why would you stop doing that? You know, that is so important. And I think as your relationship progresses, you kind of stop being that person and kind of taking that for granted. And I think that is ultimately kind of what can make and break a situation. If you're not bending over backwards and trying to impress that person, why would you not treat that person like they're your best friend still? Love is a plethora of emotions, and whether they're good or bad. Having absolute respect and no doubts in your mind that the person can meet your needs and that you can meet their needs, and that you don't have to question being yourself around them, that you can have a conversation that never ends, that you're constantly in awe of them. I think so many times that we get into relationships, whether there be partnerships in work or romantic relationships or friendships, and we start cutting ourselves off to who we truly are, to kind of fit in or blend in with that. And I know I'm totally guilty of that. Why would you want to cut off your left arm to be with somebody? You should definitely be a whole person, and they should accept you for that, and you should accept them for everything that they are. You should admire those little ticks that would maybe normally get under your skin. Love is just appreciating somebody for who they are.
Problems are small and you feel 10 feet tall. That's it, that's all, you're in love.